We are obviously starting a brand new series all about comparison, as Callie mentioned in the video. And if you didn't get a chance to get that QR code for the Bible study we're going to be doing on YouVersion over the next 21 days, just let me know afterwards. Maybe we'll even put that up as you guys go to your small group so you can get that if you want. We really just want to inspire you and give you opportunities to be able to spend time in God's Word each and every day. We believe if you do that, it's a better way to do life because we're coming under God's authority and getting our mindset right each day, not just one day out of the week. So today I want to talk about real quick the last thing maybe that you got super involved in, super sucked into. Maybe it's an extracurricular, a sport where it just took all your time. Maybe it was a TV show that you binge watched for a while. For me, I think the last thing I really got into where I just wasted time away was last summer when Stranger Things 4 came out, and I just binged it. And I watched season 4, but I hadn't seen any of the previous seasons in 3 years. So I went back from season 1 and rewatched the whole thing, including season 4 for a second time. And then Running Up That Hill, that song by Kate Bush from the 80s. Yeah, I had that on repeat for months. Corbin knows because he was here helping me with high school stuff, and I was YouTubing the cinematic version of it to see if somebody had put the orchestration behind it, just like in the show. If you haven't seen Stranger Things, you're missing out on life, just saying. But that was the last thing I got extremely sucked into. I want you to take 10 seconds, turn to the person next to you, tell them the last thing that you got really involved with. Go. What do you got? Hit me with it. Volleyball. What else? Wrestling. What else? Sports in general. Big Brother. I've never gotten into Big Brother. SpongeBob. Okay. Let me get my clarinet. That's all I know. Okay. What else? Tennis. Okay. Anything else? Any good shows other than Big Brother? The Last of Us. I didn't watch that. I want to, though. I heard it was good. Okay. Criminal Minds. I do like some good Criminal Minds, yes. Have they released the new stuff on Paramount yet? Yes. But it's terrible? Oh, it's TVMA. Dang it, Criminal Minds. All right, so we all get overly involved in things from time to time, right? We get wrapped into stuff. Honestly, that's just a really cheesy segue into what we're going to be talking about for the next 3 weeks, because we all get overly involved in comparison, right? Comparison is when we are constantly looking around us to see how we stack up, to see how we measure up. And so we're looking at those around us to see how they perform and see, oh, what should I do to blend in with them? We're afraid to stand out on our own and be wrong, right? Any of you afraid to move because of the off chance you might be wrong and you don't want to stand out like a sore thumb, right? So we all have this. I think we look around to see how we are doing in life. Maybe you thought you wrestled with this because you thought you were strong until your weights partner lifted 100 pounds more than you, and you're like, wow, I'm terribly weak, right? I remember thinking that the first time I hit the weight room. I remember, which I do all the time, as you can tell, still to this day. I thought maybe thank you. I thought maybe I was really fit until I saw somebody else who was more fit than me. I thought my fit was fly until I saw somebody else. See that transition I did there? Yeah. So that was some Gen Z logo right there, lingo. But no, you always think that you have it good until you see somebody else's, and then you're like, oh man. Like my first car. How many of you started driving already? Any of you just waiting, counting the days till you get your license? That was me growing up. And the car waiting for me was a 1995 red Plymouth minivan, Voyager. It was junk, but it was, mine. So I liked it until I blew up the engine. So that was not fun. But I was super proud of it. A buddy of mine got one of those FJ Cruisers. Landon, you drive one. Yes. That's actually to this day my dream car. Someday I'm going to get one. Except I want a black one with anyway, it's someday. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, go out and find the light blue car that's right outside the doors, and that's the one, right? So we always, sometimes when we compare ourselves to other people or what we have with somebody else, it makes us feel not great. Am I right? It makes us feel like we are less than. The list could go on for days and days, but ultimately what it does is it steals from us. Comparison is the thief of everything because no matter how you look at it, it does not help you, right? Comparison leaves you feeling empty, dissatisfied, jealous, envious, angry, frustrated, or prideful and arrogant. Because all comparison does is set up a measuring stick for you to look at yourself next to and think, am I above the bar or below it? It'll make us feel great about ourselves or terrible about ourselves. Even if you're nowhere where you should be, you can have a false sense of confidence because of comparison. It's not a helpful tool. It has a way of overtaking every part of our lives. Our thoughts, our actions, our words, our relationships, they're all impacted. And this usually happens in a slow and subtle way. And then we almost don't recognize when it's happening. Most of us, we've been playing this whole comparison game in our heads our whole lives, and we've stopped even realizing we're doing it. And nowadays, it's even worse than it was before. Like, this is a human issue since the beginning of time. But in the last 20 years, ever since social media became a thing, it's even worse, right? You don't need me to tell you that it's so easy to constantly compare yourself with the world around you. And you're not only comparing against the people you know in your community, you're comparing yourself with everybody on the planet who has access to the internet, which makes it infinitely tougher. So maybe comparison isn't a helpful tool for how to live our lives. And that's really, honestly, what we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks. That was scary. I almost fell back and bit the dust. Did you guys see that? I'm just going to cover that up real quick so I don't do that, because my chances are I'm going to be talking and I'm going to be making a really good point, and then I'm going to fall flat on my face off the stage. So we're going to get rid of that, sweep it under the rug in a good way. So, thank you. All right. So, thank you for the pity applause. Whoever that was. I couldn't tell if that was you or you. Oh, it was both of you. Okay. Thank you for that. That makes me feel better. Is it hot in here? All right. Here's the thing. We all not only compare ourselves to people in similar situations as us. Like, if you're on a sports team, you're going to compare yourself to other people on the team to see how you measure up, right? But not only do we do that, sometimes we compare ourselves to people who are not even in our area of expertise, right? We'll look at other people like, man, I like that I'm athletic, but I wish I was musical as well, right? I love that I'm creative with like graphic design and stuff, but I wish I could like edit photos really well. I wish that you can go and compare yourself endlessly with what other people have. And when we get caught up in comparing ourselves with someone who has something other than us, something that we feel like we don't, it's an automatic lose-lose situation. You cannot win. Because like I said, either you'll feel great about yourself or you'll feel terrible about yourself. Maybe you'll actually adjust your goals towards something that's not actually realistic, attainable, or good for you if you're comparing to the wrong standard. It's a lose-lose situation. The comparison starts stealing our peace and our joy. Because when you're comparing with somebody else, there's no peace with that. Because even if you achieve what you've always wanted to achieve by comparing your standards to something else, there's always going to be the next thing, and enough will never be enough. It will steal your peace. And it will steal your joy because you will cease to be happy with what you have. This is elementary principles right here. But how much do we still struggle with it every single day? And not just you, adults as well. And so if we don't want to continue down this cycle of comparison that rots our lives, how on earth do we get over it, right? Without us even realizing, our peace and joy have been taken by comparison. It is the thief of everything. So even when we compare ourselves to someone who doesn't have what we have, it can still steal from us. If we're better at this or that sport, we worry, what happens if they pass me? Right? Anybody ever been like the MVP, and then you're like, oh, wait, now I've got to level up and match that expectation now every time? I remember being in high school, my senior year, I was actually starting to score well and consistently. I could do that pull-up jump shot that I was getting like, 16, 20 points a game. And it happened for a couple games, and then I was like, oh no, Now if I don't do that, I'm going to feel terrible about myself because I know I can do it. Anybody been there and played that mind game? Right? Whatever it is for you, like if we achieve something, then we have the pressure to maintain and overachieve next time. It makes us feel insecurity. Like that joy that we should have had gets replaced by fear. The thing that should give us confidence actually starts to make us feel even more insecure. And so no matter which way you swing it, comparison is terrible. It's the thief of everything. So like I said, it's a human thing that people have struggled with since the beginning of time, ever since Cain and Abel. When Cain looked at Abel's sacrifices and was like, wow, mine are terrible now. I hate you, right? And in comparison, turned him into a murderer, right? Hopefully, none of you do that. At least, like, not, because that would be bad. Can we all agree murder is bad, right? My point is this has been around since the beginning. So if we want to get on a path that doesn't lead to murder, because that's bad, then the question should be how do we overcome this? So we're going to look to where Paul was writing in the New Testament. He wrote to a bunch of churches addressing things that every single person struggles with. He talked about the things that the church was struggling with because, hey, church, we should know better. We should do better. There's a better way. And so he's writing to the church in Corinth, and this is what he says in chapter 10, verse 12. He says, oh, don't worry. We wouldn't dare say that we are as wonderful as these other men who tell you how important they are. Can you sense the sarcasm in his voice there? We wouldn't dare to say that we're as wonderful as these other men who tell you how important they are, but they're only comparing themselves with each other, using themselves as a standard of measurement. How ignorant. Right now, he's talking about false teachers that had rolled into town and were claiming to have the truth, and it was contradictory to what Jesus had already accomplished. And they were praising themselves about their own accomplishments. You ever met somebody who's just like, they feel like they've got to prove themselves, so they're talking about all the things that they've done? Right? That's like what these guys are doing. And so Paul's like, not playing that game. He's like, oh, we wouldn't dare say how wonderful we are, right? But ultimately, they're comparing themselves to each other, which is not the same measurement that God uses. Right? We understand this because if you were to be at a smaller school, like I was growing up, you could be like the best basketball player there is until you go and play some bigger schools and you're like, oh, I'm terrible at basketball, right? But in your one little small tiny context, you were it. And then you go out into where there's more people. Then you start to get a better perspective. When we compare ourselves to only what we immediately see around us, it's not accurate. And we do this in our Christian walk, in our faith. We look around, let's see, is everybody else forgetting to read their Bible every day? Or is everybody else so busy? Does everybody else scroll for like 3 hours every day? Is everybody else playing video games till 3 a.m? Like, if we're looking around and it's common, then we'll go, I'm not that bad. I'm only up till like 2 o'clock every morning, right? We'll think, oh, I only scroll like 2 hours every night. We'll start to compare ourselves to those around us that we see and think we're doing great because we're comparing falsely with something that doesn't matter. You guys get the point. And Paul is calling this out even with the church. And a few verses later, he says this, when people commend themselves, it doesn't count for much. The important thing is for the Lord to commend them. Now, honest question, how many of us actually are seeing if we are living up to God's standard for our lives often? Because most of the time we don't. Most of the time we think, how am I doing compared to everyone else around me? Instead of going, God, how good am I doing? God's standards are so much higher and better for us than the examples we're going to find around us. And as long as we are measuring ourselves with the people around us, again, it's a lose-lose situation because either you'll feel terrible about yourself or you'll feel overly confident about yourself. It's not accurate. And if you want to grow in life, if you want to grow in your faith, if you want to grow in any area, you can't measure yourself with what you see around you. You have to measure yourself with a standard that is set by a higher authority. Somebody who knows better. Maybe someone who designed it a certain way. And so that's what God has done for our lives. So instead, God's encouraging us to turn our focus towards Him. Right? If we focus on Him and His standards for our lives, we're going to succeed more often because we're going to be striving towards something that's actually achievable and striving towards something that we're actually designed to do. And then comparison stops having so much control and power in your life. It stops stealing your joy, stops stealing your peace, and it stops making you feel either arrogant or terrible about yourself. Sometimes both at the same time. And so God doesn't compare you to others. For some of you, that's terrible news. Because you've been going to church your whole life. You know all the Bible answers. You've heard the stories 1,000 times. You grew up in Sunday school. You've seen all the Veggie Tales. Okay, maybe not you guys, because that was me. But maybe you think, I know so much. I know so much more than all the people that I know. I know what it means to have good relationships. I don't have a messed up family. I don't, and you can go on and on and on. But it's a false measuring rod. Some of you, the idea that God doesn't compare you to others is freeing, because you know you can't live up to so-and-so. You can't live up to somebody else's highlight reel. Your day-to-day life doesn't look that magnificent, but God doesn't compare you to others. God's not looking to see how we line up with the people around us, and He's not taking away points when we don't maintain the image that we try to protect. He designed us to be the way that we are, with unique gifts and abilities that only we can do. A path for our lives that if we veer off and try to follow somebody else's path, we're not going to go to the same destination that God wants us to. We're going to talk more about that in a couple weeks. But the book of Proverbs gives us a good starting point for how to practically apply this in our lives. In chapter 4, verse 23, it says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Comparison starts in the heart. It starts in the heart. The most important thing we should do would be to guard our heart. To set up some protection. Right? Guardrails are good because they're not necessarily going to stop your car from going off the edge, but they might wake you up a little bit. Guarding your heart is the same thing. When things start beating up against those guardrails, you start to, maybe I'm falling too much into comparison. Maybe, and that should be your red flag. I need to put up some more guardrails. Guard your heart above all else, because it will determine the course of your life. So, first thing I'd suggest you do is, one, pay attention to your feelings. Right? If you pay attention to what you're feeling, what's triggering it, when things hit those guardrails and you start to feel anxious, you start to feel whatever, okay, what am I comparing myself to? What identify where those are coming from. Pay attention to those feelings. And then find out what's fueling it. Right? Is it comparison at all? Is it something else? Most of the time, if it's comparison, if you're trying to figure out what's fueling it, you'll think, let's check my screen time. Oh, I was on Instagram for 90 minutes out of the last 93 minutes. Okay. Maybe that's what's fueling it. If you're starting to feel like you don't measure up, retrace your steps over the last few hours, over the last few days, last few weeks. What have you been investing your mind and your heart in? What is fueling the feelings that you're feeling? So pay attention to what you're feeling, find out what's fueling it. And it's kind of like our phones have kind of like become extensions of us. We don't really think about them even when we're on them. It's like that. How many of you were standing in line for dinner and you just found yourself naturally like, I don't know what I'm doing, and then you just kind of put your phone away? Right? I'm guilty of it. I do it all the time. I'll like sit at home and I'll lean up against the counter and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not even getting on my phone. I'm just looking at my phone. It's like an extension of us, and we don't really notice it until that 20% warning comes up. And then what do? We start like, where's the charger? Where's my charger? I need to find my charger. Right? And then we start like recognizing, I need to do something. I need to change something. And the same is true when it comes to comparing ourselves with others. Comparing ourselves to others is like having a low battery. It's the sign that we're not guarding our hearts. In the same way that a low battery is a sign to charge our phones, what if comparing became your signal to focus on the God who loves you so much? What if that became the sign? When you start comparing yourself to other people, that's your wake-up call that, wait, I'm focusing on the wrong thing. And it bring your attention back. Because we're all going to fall into it. So how do we overcome it? Right? And lastly, celebrate what you do have. It's really hard to feel the negative side effects of comparison when you're just constantly celebrating what you do have. When you have a great heart. There's been studies on this of people who literally journal or take 10 minutes a day, adding to a list of things that they're grateful for. And it's something that happens in your brain chemistry or changes, you can look up some studies on it if you Google it, but being grateful changes your brain. It changes how you think. And so celebrate what you have. It'll make you much less stressed about what you don't have.